For those of you who may not know, or maybe you do, fellow podcaster, content creator, and somebody who has been a fixture in this space for many, many years, Jimmy Dore and his wife, Stef Zamarono, who I have actually spent time with personally. They were nearly in a fatal plane crash yesterday in California. And when these types of things happen, they really tend to put life in perspective. And while constantly I try to rally, as Jen does as well, as many people to the cause, the right cause, as possible in these tough moments, especially in lieu of the genocide, which Jimmy has been spot on with, to his credit, from day one. He's done an excellent job as far as that goes. Jimmy is very rough around the edges. He's not everybody's cup of tea. He has thrown people under the bus. He has put people in very uncompromising positions when it comes to where they stand politically, even if it's not 100% on board with where they necessarily stand. And unfortunately, Jimmy has, when I say he's thrown people under the bus, I'm specifically talking about Jen and I. But with that said, I don't harbor ill will towards him. I never did. I didn't particularly like his shtick at times. I don't like the way he treated some of my friends. But a lot of what he does talk about has relevance. And so I want people to understand that even if you have disagreements with people, life can come get you very quickly. And so this was a clip that was dropped on social media by Jimmy and Stef yesterday in lieu of their near fatal collision in air on their way from Burbank, California to Las Vegas.
Just a few minutes ago, we ended up having crazy turbulence on this flight. Like, Jimmy, have you ever had that experience before that much?
It turns out not turbulence. It was the pilot taking an aggressive move because there was another plane coming at us. That's what it was. There's a collision avoidance.
We're driving home.
I said my best to Jimmy and Stef. On a personal level, Stef is a sweetheart. I just have to put that out there. She's a very sweet lady. I'm sure dealing with Jimmy is a handful. But, you know, Jimmy's been through a lot. Jimmy's been vaccine injured. He's had severe back problems. And I think a lot of that tends to spill over into how he conducts himself at times. And it is unfortunate that that is the case. But I also believe that Jimmy has a good heart. He is trying to do right. And he feels that when people are not completely black and white when it comes to all of the political bullshit that we deal with on a regular basis, you know, he gets very sensitive about it. And I understand that. But he was somebody who Jen and I, despite our differences, were on board with 100% when he was organizing the Force the Vote initiative about 4 years ago. And the thing that I noticed at the time was that there were people that were not agreeing to go forward with this attempt to force the Democratic Party to vote on single-payer health care. Bring it to the floor, have a vote in lieu of voting for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker. And they had enough votes to force the vote. And the leader of that so-called squad was AOC. And she chose, as she has displayed over the past several years, that her career is more important than the people. And at the time, Jimmy was very adamant that this is the way to go. And there were tons of people within that Democratic Party, independent media establishment that initially were on board with it. And then they got the memo and they decided, yeah, we're not on board with this anymore. And so while everyone was like, well, I don't like Jimmy anyway, so who cares? My attitude was, I've actually dealt with Jimmy on a personal level. And there were times that he was good to me, and there were times that he wasn't, and especially to Jed. And you know what? I would still put those differences aside if it meant fighting on the front lines of an issue that absolutely mattered. I think we can all agree that on the international level, the issue of Israel-Palestine, more specifically the genocide in Gaza, is the top priority of today. If we were to, minus the Epstein files, acknowledge what is the top domestic policy that I think most of us would agree with, it would be single-payer healthcare. That is the issue of our time. That is the issue that brings as many people across all political spectrums together that agree with what would be considered technically a left policy, if you will. And so Jimmy was at the forefront of pushing this policy. And I agreed with him. And so did Jen. And we were discussing it at length on the podcast. And we noticed that there were other content creators that, because they didn't like Jimmy, that would be one. And because it was going against the Democratic Party, that would be two. And so protecting the establishment was more important than actually making a stand. And at that moment, you found out who was really on board with the issue that mattered. And the same is true when it came to what has been going on over the past couple of years as it pertains to Gaza. Jimmy, again, like I said, he's rough around the edges, but he came through when he absolutely needed to, and he has been front and center correct on the issue of Israel-Palestine since jump. And that must be acknowledged. I bring this up because if we had gotten a message today that Jimmy Dore and Stef Zamarono were killed in an on-air collision, which they were pretty close to that happening, I can only imagine how people would be talking about it today, or how they would be addressing Jimmy if in fact that had happened. My understanding, based on what I've read, and I'm not just talking about what is being said on social media, I'm talking about actual FAA report, which friend of the show, Hard Lens Media, Kit Cabello, was discussing earlier today. If you look at the flight pattern from the FAA, they had to basically do a nosedive to avoid hitting this other plane. And because they did that, several people were thrown out of their seats. Several people needed medical attention. Several people, I believe, even needed to go to the hospital. This is serious. And I hope that people have perspective about the disagreements that we have in politics and the type of people we disagree with. It is crucial that when we have certain issues that we agree on, that we acknowledge those that are doing the work that we're trying to do as well, even if we don't get along or even disagree outright on a number of other things. And so I bring this up because much as Jimmy and Steph just went through their near-death air experience, I actually had one myself, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up this evening. So we go back probably a decade, I would say, give or take. I was flying to South Florida from New Jersey, and the airport that I was designated to fly into was Fort Lauderdale. And instead, because there was a bad storm over South Florida, the plane actually diverted into West Palm Beach, about 50 miles away from Fort Lauderdale. And so when we landed, the pilot gave us an opportunity, if you will, to get off the plane. Do you want to get off here, or do you want to wait until the storm clears, and then we will proceed to Fort Lauderdale? Well, considering my situation and how I was going to be getting home, I decided to stay on the plane. Well, when the plane took off again, needless to say, it was not fun. In fact, it was a potentially near-death experience for me. So the plane ended up flying somehow directly into the storm. And when I say that we hit air pockets, and that cabin pressure went through the roof. People were screaming. People were throwing up in the little bags. I'll never forget that one. And the only reason that I maintained a level head is because I was sitting next to this young kid who was allowing me to play some type of a handheld game. I don't remember if it was Nintendo, Switch or whatever it was, but I just remember that I was so intensely focused on what I was doing that I didn't even think about what was going on around me. Up and down, and feeling like something really bad was going to happen. And when we touched down, I just remember thinking how grateful I was that I was able to get through this. Because this is one of the biggest reasons I think people have a fear of flying, is because you're not in control. You are putting your life in somebody else's hands. And that's a big deal. And so I remember that moment. I was on a flight not too long ago that had a midair problem, and we had to divert back to the airport. We were in the air for about 30 minutes, but that's how serious it was. They felt, yeah, we have to divert. We've got a, they said it was, I don't remember the exact issue that they said. It had something to do with the fuel injection system, but I don't remember the specific reason. What I do remember is the people again on the plane freaking out, and understandably so. So these types of moments, I believe, put a lot of things in perspective, as they should. So I'm glad to hear that Jimmy and Stef are okay. And I think we, from time to time, need these moments of reflection to recognize that life is very, very fleeting. You're here 1 minute, you could be gone the next. And so by fate, if you will, they're safe, but it could have been a real disaster. And thankfully it wasn't.